Welcome on back to the 4th and 30 podcast. Glad to have you all here. If you're watching us on YouTube, click the subscribe button. It's free. It actually feels kind of cool when you do it because it like grays out and you're just like, oh, I'm doing something with my life. So go ahead and subscribe to that. Like us on Facebook. We really appreciate that stuff and it helps us out. It's still March Madness, and this tournament has really lived up to the hype of being madness. We didn't get any March Madness last year because of COVID, so I believe the basketball overlords are making up for it this year.
Doubling down this year.
But so what has been the biggest surprise for you guys this year? I know there's quite a few. There's some upsets. There's some conferences not doing well. So, Cody, who do you got in your surprise category?
So there's a lot of them. I think I tried to think a little bit off the beaten path of who everyone would say. But my biggest surprise so far is UCLA. And it's my personal surprise. I know a lot of people thought they were good going into it. I think the obvious answer is either maybe not Loyola because of the run they had 2 years ago, and then Oral Roberts being a 15 seed and making it when a lot of people knew that Oral Roberts was pretty good going into it. But UCLA, a high major team, 11 seed, and I didn't even pick them winning the play-in game. And they win that game, and then they win the next game, and then they win the next game, and they've got a good matchup against Arkansas now, or Bama.
Alabama.
And
Alabama.
I think they got a good chance of winning that today. So that's a big surprise to me. I didn't even pick them to win the play-in game, and here they are with a tremendous shot at the Elite Eight. So that's got to be my.
They got helped out a little bit by your boy calling Abilene Christian over Texas, and they got to play a 14 seed.
And they've had a pretty good road, but they played well too. So that would be my biggest surprise so far. If I had to veer off a little bit, I would say the 2 games of Oregon that I've watched so far, Oregon is really, really, really good. I never watched them all year until the tournament. I don't know how they were such low of a seed. I don't know if it's injuries or what, but Oregon is really good.
Well, your surprise will come to an end today because they'll get beat by Alabama. Honestly, you said Loyola Chicago wasn't as big a surprise because of what they did 2 years ago. I'm going to say the opposite. I'm going to say a team like Loyola Chicago almost making it to the Elite Eight for a second straight year. They made it to the Final Four 2 years ago, almost made it to the Elite Eight, knocked off a 1-seed Illinois. I would say that's got to open some eyes. I mean, I get what you're saying. We've seen it happen before.
Butler.
But that's insane. Loyola Chicago almost fighting for back-to-back Elite Eight appearances. And before Sister Jean and 2 years ago, nobody even knew who Loyola Chicago was as a basketball school.
Yeah, but they knocked off a number 1 seed on a Sunday who their mascot is a nun who's been praying since 1930. Like, you can't compete with that. Illinois was never in that game. Not from tip-off out. Illinois was never in that game. So.
Not if the good Lord had anything to do with it.
So you guys have touched on my surprise a little bit, and that's just the Pac-12 conference in general. Over the last, 8, 9, 10 years, they have been, almost irrelevant. Arizona's had a good team here and there. Yeah, they've had 0 PR, 0 earnings. But
Fish tank water.
This year, the pandemic has risen the Pac-12 back up. And to your point, Cody, about Oregon being a 7 seed, they were 21-6 on the season, and that's a dang good record. And when you look at their losses, they lost to Mizzou, tournament team. They lost to Colorado, tournament team. Oregon State, who is in the Elite Eight. Washington State, USC, and Oregon State again. Those were their only losses. So I think what you're seeing this year is a rise back of the Pac-12. They've gotten better, and their seeding is reflected from previous years and not this year. They've got 1 team in the Elite Eight already. 2 more could follow today. And they're 10-1 in the tournament so far. So an outstanding. I'm glad to see the Pac-12 back relevant again. It just makes the tournament that much more interesting.
Yeah, somewhere Bill Walton is smiling. You just yelling "Conference of Champions" into his bag.
He's been partying for the last 2 weeks for sure.
And the inverse of that, the Big Ten is still dog water. Haven't won a national championship since 2000, and they're running out of opportunity to do that. Praying that Michigan can hold on for them. But the Big Ten, who everyone thought was the best conference in the country, proves once again that they fall short.
Carl has heard me on my soapbox many a times talk about Big Ten basketball. It is not championship style basketball.
Dribble for 30 seconds.
Dribble the shot
put up a terrible
out.
shot. Put it good defense.
Call
go
it
back
good
down the floor and do it
defense, and the other team goes back down the floor and does the same exact thing. You're not going to win national championships scoring 50, 60 points a game. It's just not going to happen. And not that there's not great players and great teams in the Big Ten, but you've got to be able to put up 80 on a given night to compete for a national championship.
And to have the Big Ten, to have 9 teams in the tournament, which is a fairly high percentage of everybody that's in the damn tournament, to have 9 teams in it and you only have one make it past the round of 32 is absolutely bonkers. Mm-hmm. You know, you had Ohio State and Purdue both got bounced in the round of 64. Like, come on. Like, that was if you go back a couple podcasts ago, I said it was hard for me to not put Big Ten teams in the Final Four. Well, for the next however many years of my life, it's going to be very easy for me to not put Big Ten teams in the Final Four.
Until they break that curse.
No, they ain't. This was the kick in the shorts that I think I needed to. And it's wild, though. When you live in Big Ten country, a lot of these people have rivalries, right? And every conference does. But what I've noticed about the Big Ten, everybody hates Michigan. There's like everybody's rival is Michigan. And now you have all of these schools that now have to root for Michigan getting to the Final Four so they can get money from for their conference. I think that is hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
I think the way a lot of people hate the Patriots, a lot of ways the people hate the Celtics and Lakers or the Cowboys, it's the fans. The Michigan fans are... I have a few friends that are Michigan fans, so no disrespect to you guys, but Michigan fans are rough, man. They think they're the best in everything. They haven't been very successful in football. They haven't been very successful in basketball lately. In terms of winning the whole shebang. But yet every year it's their year. Every year they're the best team on the block, and it never comes to fruition.
After this podcast, I'm writing down on my whiteboard, do not pick Big Ten to win it all, because I fell in that. ESPN forced me to fall into that trap again. I picked Illinois, and I'm having deja vu here. If I was the Big Ten commissioner and he had the power and he was like a GM of that conference, I'd just blow that whole conference up and just bring in a bunch of new teams, because that's just embarrassing.
Loyola Chicago, Oral Roberts,
Notre Dame. Just bring them in.
I already told you guys I'm mad at you guys for talking me into picking Illinois, because I did not have Illinois in my championship until you guys talked about Kofi Cockburn and the guy I can't pronounce his name.
Coburn.
And talked them up like they were gods and they were going to win the national championship. I had Baylor and Gonzaga as the best 2 teams in the country all year, and I let you guys talk me into something different.
Hey, man, sometimes you have to be your own man. You could have went against us. You could have been that guy. You could sit in there like, I told you guys Illinois sucked.
You let us in your head.
Yeah. I did.
So I made a comment last podcast about Mark Few's teams are always great teams. Mark Few is a great coach, but they never win the big games. I watched that Oklahoma-Gonzaga game start to finish. Every possession. Oklahoma played that game as near perfect as they could have, and Oklahoma's a good team, and Gonzaga was never in trouble, ever, once in that game. When Oklahoma cut it from 17 to 8 or 9, they didn't sweat it out. They just kicked it back into gear and took off with the game. So I have to stand on my Michigan pick to win it all, because that's who I picked before. But it's really hard for me to pick against Gonzaga right now. They look damn good.
Well, how about a couple weeks ago, we also talked about what was he thinking. Obviously, McDermott made a terrible comment, but Creighton, as Kelsey wanted to point out, the only time they've made it past the round or made it to the tournament, I think, was when they had Dougie there.
And when they made the Sweet 16s with Doug.
Okay, well, where are they now? And who's not there?
To get pounded by Gonzaga.
They made the Sweet 16.
I tried to tell you guys 2 weeks ago that Gonzaga is by far the most talented team in the country. Chris Burt, Timmy Suggs, that team is stacked. I mean, they are a very good team. Like, you can go back and talk about. I'm not saying they're historically top 5 or anything, but they're a historically talented team. That team has so much talent.
Yeah,
I think
Well, they
we all
still
kind of
have to win
agreed.
4 more.
I think we all kind of agreed that Gonzaga was the best team throughout the year. But how many times in the tournament do you see the best team not win? I mean, it just takes one loss. So, I mean, it's not a done deal that they win it. They could get upset, just like they're still college kids. And I'm kind of hoping for an upset because I did not pick Gonzaga.
Same. I tell you, what's a bettor's nightmare moving forward? So, like 2022 and so on, you're going to be inclined to bet on Loyola, and that's going to be when they lose in the first round. Like,
Yep.
eventually that luck runs out, and you're like, somebody's going to put, multiple units on Loyola moving forward, and like next year, it's like, oh, yeah, they're going to make the Sweet 16. I'm going to put, $1,000 on it, and it's not going to happen.
Well, the fact is, God forbid, I don't hope for anyone's death, but
Well, they
Sister
have
Jean
a
is
none. But yeah.
she's getting pretty old, so I don't know if she'll make it to next year or the year after. Next time they're in the tournament,
but she's got Jesus on her side, so
Yeah, she's been vaccinated too. So
I'm gonna go
anyway.
on into biggest disappointments, and my biggest disappointment is gonna be Florida. I thought Florida had a chance to have a pretty good run. The cards fell for good matchups for them. Even when you look ahead, if they had won their round of 32 game, and they didn't perform. Granted, they ran into a great Oral Roberts team, but 15 seed and 7 seed in Florida. I thought that run fell a little bit short to where they could have easily had a great run. So I'm a little disappointed personally that Florida didn't turn out a little better than they did this year.
Oral Roberts was hot though. I mean,
Yeah, they were.
They almost beat Arkansas there yesterday. So
should have beat Arkansas.
They had 2 guys on their team averaging over 23 a game for 3 games. That's two heavy scorers there. That Banner and
A. Smith, he led the nation in scoring throughout the year. He was the leading scorer.
So they had a lot of firepower on that team.
And that Abmas or whatever, he was the first player since Steph Curry to average 25 plus in his first 3 tournament games. And I'm not comparing him to Steph Curry. I'm just saying that's the last time it happened. So.
Impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, biggest disappointment, you could go a lot of ways. Like we said, this has been hectic. But my biggest disappointment is myself for picking Illinois. No. Illinois has to be up there, losing to an in-state 9 seed or 8 seed Loyola Chicago. I think they were I don't know if they were second or third most popular pick to win it all behind Gonzaga and maybe Baylor. But Illinois, I don't know what it is about Illinois. Every time they get in this situation, it feels like they become huge disappointments. I don't know.
I hadn't thought about this since I brought it up in the other podcast. It's been broken now. The rule of 16 has been broken. So, Kai, go ahead and call your bookie and call off the 2037 bet.
Already done. Did it right after the game. Yeah, Illinois is a huge disappointment. I drive, I listen to some Illinois radio stations when I'm driving for work, and those guys were so excited. This was the year, this was the team, and then they lose in the second round. And like you said, a lot of people picked them, but I know to the state of Illinois that's a huge disappointment. They were really excited, but I'm gonna switch gears here and say that what a disappointment it was, as usual, for Missouri fans, because Missouri started out the year hot, and they did that thing where they returned everybody. It was a COVID year. I think that might have played a little bit into it. A lot of summer workouts were called off. Missouri started out the season hot. They got into the top 15, and then as teams started to catch up to them, you saw them kind of fell off. Not just that they lost, but they've already had 3 of their top players enter the transfer portal for next year. Xavier Pinson, Mark Smith, Brown, they're all gone. You got to wonder if Konzo Martin's next, because it just seems to all be falling apart in Missouri again. Another disappointment for me was University of Texas. They won the Big 12 tournament. They come in, they lose to Abilene Christian, as Carl called it, and I told him he was crazy. And their head coach already bolted from Marquette. So I would say Texas, it was Texas was becoming relevant again for that fan base. They've been down in football and basketball. And they lose in the first round to a 14 seed, and now your head coach is gone. So they're starting over as well. So a lot of disappointing fan bases out there as usual this time of year.
Sidetrack for just a second. What was up with that move for Shaka Smart? Like, Marquette's a
he was gonna
great
get
program.
fired.
Okay.
He was going to get fired.
That makes
He has done
sense
nothing
then.
in Texas. He was
He
going to get
needs
fired.
he needs to go back to shaving his head. Like he looks stupider with hair, right?
Yeah. The bald
Well, he
Shaka
did-
Smart was dope.
I wouldn't say
He's
he did
from the
nothing.
Northeast.
He did win the Big 12 tournament this year, and they were a 3 seed. That's better than they've been for, 15 years?
Rick Barnes had, I guess, but they had just as much success under Barnes as they have under Smart. If they moved on from Barnes, then why would they keep Smart? One other thing, you were talking about disappointing fan bases. I know we have less following for this team, but me and Cody care about this team. North Carolina, after they lost, the freshman big man, 7-foot guy, Walker Kessler, decided he's going to enter the transfer portal, and the freshman big guy, Dayron Sharp, decided he's going to enter the NBA draft. So North Carolina, one of their 4 big men is a senior, and the other two of the other 4 are entering or leaving. So North Carolina's gonna have some rebuilding to do.
For Mizzou, though, I don't really see that as disappointing because it's almost expected.
It's rinse and repeat with Mizzou.
It's
But
expected for them to piss down their
that's the
leg every year.
That's the disappointing part. Everybody knew it was coming, and it came.
Yeah.
And they were hoping it wouldn't come, and it still came.
It's the same thing. Get a new coach, get some recruits, take a couple years, get a little bit of hype behind you, melt down in the tournament or in the conference tournament, fire the coach, players leave, get a new coach, get some players, get some hype. It's the same thing.
Here's one thing.
It used to be you beat Kansas in September and then you get screwed the rest of the year.
Here's one thing that that Mizzou, it boggles my mind. I cheer for Mizzou. It's not like I don't cheer for Mizzou. People think I don't like Mizzou. I like Mizzou. I lived in Columbia for 10 years of my life. I want Mizzou to be successful. Mizzou fans do it to themselves sometimes. Mizzou was an 8 seed this year. They weren't a top 4 seed. Yes, they had some big wins. They did, but they also had some ugly losses. Like Mizzou was a good team. They weren't a great team this year. And people get so hyped about how this team's different. And North Carolina was an 8 seed and we were upset. Mizzou's an 8 seed and people are talking about they're the kings of the world. Like you gotta be realistic about things sometimes, and they get so hyped that they do it to themselves sometimes.
And I think if they let go of Martin as the coach, it's going to be a never-ending thing with Mizzou basketball. It's probably what they're going to do, but Martin's a good coach. In college, you've got to let guys get established. It's not the NBA where every team has loads of talent, pretty much. You've got to let him get some guys that play his style and whatnot. And when it comes to Martin, and the same thing with Kim Anderson. Kim Anderson was about as dominant as you can be in Division II. And what he last at Mizzou, 2 or 3 years? Never even really got to get his own guys in there and play his style of basketball that was proven to be winning basketball. It's just never going to be. It's going to be never ending until Missouri has some big Tyler Hansbrough type recruit that they get somehow with a coach that they like, and that one player can propel them to some success, or you're just going to keep rinse and repeat the same cycle over and over and over again.
Well, that's another disappointing thing because they did have that recruit. They had Michael Porter Jr., and they had a pretty good team around him. He just got hurt in the first game of the season.
You're right.
That is one season where, had that gone differently, that could have propelled Mizzou for a few years. Michael Porter Jr., everybody was excited. I mean, Mizzou hoops hadn't been that exciting since Quinn Snyder, and it was unfortunate, but you're right. They need something like that to happen again.
Well, the 2 guys I can think of pre-Michael Porter Jr. are Tyler Hansbrough and Bradley Beal, and you let them both get away. Jason Tatum, yes. You let them guys, all 3, get away from in-state. Tatum went to Duke, Bradley Beal went to Florida, and Hansbrough was down to Florida and North Carolina. Like, granted, those are North Carolina's a storied program, and Florida, who wouldn't want to play college basketball in Florida, whatever school it is, Florida, Florida State, whatever. But those are hometown guys, and you just can't let those recruits go somewhere else. You've got to make it work somehow.
At the time Hansborough was coming out, wasn't that when Florida was like really good?
Yeah,
like,
they
back to
were
back?
they were fresh off back-to-back national championships. And then there was another guy in 2006, Alex Tyus, who ended up he wasn't an NBA player, but St. Louis kid was had potential through the roof. Mizzou doesn't even hardly recruit him, and he goes to Florida and plays in Florida for Billy
The
Donovan.
fact is,
and
Mizzou has to figure out how to recruit
keep
St. Louis
in-state
because they're not.
recruits.
Well, St. Louis especially, because Kansas City, with Kansas being on the other side, they're just not going to really win Kansas City. With Illinois being on the other side, you can win St. Louis, but they've got to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and the list goes on. Marcus Walker goes to Nebraska to play. Top 100 recruit in the nation, 2005, goes to Nebraska to play instead of because Mizzou didn't get him. But anywho.
Switching gears, well, not really switching gears, but I'd just like to shout out, not really a surprise, but what Leonard Hamilton's done at Florida State these last 5-6 years. You can argue he's been more consistent than Duke or North Carolina as far as, making deep runs in the NCAA tournament. He hasn't gotten to his Final Four yet. I think he has a decent shot this year.
Yeah, Michigan better be on upset alert.
I'm rooting for him. But just shout out Leonard Hamilton, one of the best coaches in college basketball.
Yeah,
doing it year in, year out.
Turned a football school into a basketball powerhouse.
And one thing I note about him is he does it different than everybody else. Cody will love this. Does it with 2 7-footers all the time on the court. He pounds people in the
They're
paint.
always big and physical.
Even their guards are always big.
Yeah.
Blue blood fans this year. So Duke, UNC, Kentucky, Kansas, UCLA, and I think people throw Michigan State in there too. If you would have told a fan of like any of those schools that UCLA as an 11 seed would be your last hope left to make the Elite Eight, what would they have said? So it's the first time since 1979 that Duke, UNC, or Kansas, one of those three, isn't in the Sweet 16. What do you think would have happened if you had told that to somebody in August?
I would have assumed, if you would have told me 2 years prior, I would have assumed the NBA was getting rid of the one and done rule, and that all the great players and the G League salary going up big time helps with that too. I would assume that G League players were getting paid good money, and that there was no one and done rule, and all the top basketball players were going straight to the G League or the NBA. Is the only way I could see that happening.
I would have said it must be a pandemic year, and it was. But, it just goes to show you, like, the one and done. Duke has been hitting on crazy talent for the last – Kentucky, too. This year, their talent they had just as good a recruiting class, but their talent was nowhere near what it was with Zion Williamson, Cam Reddish, and RJ Barrett on the same team. That's just insane. I mean, this year it wasn't even near that. Actually, the last 2 years, it hasn't even been hardly close to what they had the few years prior to that. So I think it's just a risky road to take that. And you see it now with Kentucky and Duke, struggling the way they did this year. The talent's it's a gamble road to take if you don't have 2, 3, 4 year players on your team.
So this is kind of the same thing Kyler said, but I would say it's got to be 2020. Like, that's the only way it's possible. It's been a crazy year. Why not finish it with the basketball season? I know it's 2021 now, but the basketball season, why not any of the Blue Bloods make the Sweet 16?
UCLA still can, technically, but they have a tough Alabama team coming. So the transition on to some breakouts, I'm actually going to go a different route. So all three of you have played quite a bit of both competitive and recreational basketball. And there's a team that, yes, they got knocked out yesterday, but they do something very well that most teams have kind of gone away from, I think. And that's playing the 2-3 zone in Syracuse. They do it really, really well. So what do you think like a well-coached team being able to play that zone, why do you think that is so hard for teams to come up against?
The thing,
Teams get confused when they can't get the ball in the paint.
yeah, and
They
you
don't know what to
see
do.
when you're a top tier team, you see man to man every second of every game that you play all year long, unless you're playing Syracuse. And I don't care how much zone or how much 2-3 you practice against or walk through against in the prior days to playing Syracuse, you can't get used to a Joe Boeheim 2-3 zone.
Jim.
Or Jim Boeheim, yeah. He lacks length a little bit this year to make it quite as dynamic as it normally is, but you know it's coming. You know a week in advance if you're playing Syracuse that 2-3 zone's coming, but they just execute it well, and you can't replicate it in practice. There's no way you can get ready for it without playing against Syracuse's zone.
There's no doubt that Syracuse's 2-3 zone is better in the tournament than it is during the regular season. The only teams that can be prepared for it are if they played it in the regular season. And if you look not even just Syracuse, if you look across the board at who's left in the tournament, Florida State plays good defense. The team that beat Syracuse, Houston, only allows 53 points per game this year. And Loyola Chicago, they were known for their top-ranked defense in the nation. So if you look across the board, defense has kind of won out probably more this year than it usually has. I think, obviously, 2020 had something to do with that. And, they did have length. They just only played like 6 people. So if someone got in foul trouble, they were in trouble. But, yeah, there's no denying that 2-3 zone definitely gives offenses fits this time of year. They were an 11 seed 4 or 5 years ago and made the Elite Eight.
Boeheim teams are always going to be long athletic teams, regardless. Comparative to the rest of the field, he's always going to have a super long athletic team. They just, when you think back to some of his dominant zone teams when he had, in 2003 when he had Carmelo, Warwick Dunn, and that other 7-footer.
Hakeem Warwick.
Hakeem Warwick, yeah. Not Warwick Dunn, the running back for the Buccaneers. That's two name mess ups I've had with Syracuse in the last little clip. But Hakeem Warwick, Carmelo, and that other big power forward they had, I can't think of his name, but they could legitimately, wingspan wise, go almost the entire width of the floor, fingertips touching. That's just hard to replicate. But his defense is always dominant in the tournament, always.
So I mean, it might be $1 million question. But what makes him so much better at coaching the 2-3 zone than everybody else? I mean, why is it so hard to coach the 2-3 zone?
It's his willingness to commit to it and recruit to it.
Hold on, 2 things. I was going to say something about Cody saying what Cody said. One thing that he teaches it well. I mean, they play it as well as you can play it. But 2, no one else does it. So just because it works for Syracuse, if everyone did it, then everyone would be preparing against the 2-3 zone, and it would be a little bit different playing field. When you only see it once every 25 games, it's a different story. If you're not preparing for it, if you're not seeing it regularly, it's a completely different game. If everyone did it, it would be different. I mean, if we'd be preparing more for it, everyone would know how to do it, so they'd be preparing against that.
Flashback to the Gators we were just talking about when they came off the back-to-back stretch. A lot of things people don't remember is Billy Donovan played a 2-3 matchup, and it just confused the hell out of people. When you got a big center like Horford or Noah in the middle, and all your wings are matching up and applying on-ball pressure like it's man-to-man, and then you've got the weak side just sitting in the paint, that I credit that more so than the talent that they had was how well Billy Donovan coached the 2-3 zone too and proved you can win a national championship. Well, I guess it would have been 03, 05, 06. All the national champions played majority 2-3 zone. So it works. So you've got to commit to it.
The most common shot you're going to get with a 2-3 zone is that 15 to 18 foot jumper, right? Mm-hmm. Which is not a shot a lot of kids practice anymore. You either want to do layups and dunks or you want to shoot 35-foot threes. So, and even that guy from Nate Oates, coach down in Alabama, he even had a 1-point line painted on the floor to discourage kids from taking that 15 to 18-foot jumper. And that's the shot you get the most in the zone. So
Analytics made the
do you
2-3
see-
zone relevant. You
Do
heard
you
it here
see the
first.
2-3 zone coming back because of that? Like everybody wants this Curry range, and that's fine. You can win like that. But also, like if you're able to defend that well, like defense does win championships. If you guys just described, do you think we see 2-3 zone come back more in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think
I
it's.
don't.
I think
I don't because I think they implement a defensive 3-second rule once Jim Boeheim retires.
I think that you're seeing versions of the 2-3 zone. The way college and NBA teams play it is not the way high school kids play it. It's completely different. But you see NBA teams like the Mavs run a little bit of zone when Boban has to play just because he can't guard. And there's little iterations too. It's still man-to-man principles. But if you watch late in games when teams are playing the Blazers, because it's a team I see all the time, Dame brings the ball up the floor, they will put a center or a wing player on Dame because that ball screen's coming early and you know it, and you have your point guard guy guarding the ball or guarding the screen setter, so you can immediately set, and they're already almost set in like zone principles. And then when they get the matchups they like, then they blitz them and play man to man. So there's iterations of 2-3 zones sprinkled all through man to man basketball, but with the 15 to 18 foot shot going away, it's a viable form of defense.
To answer your question, though, I don't see anyone coming out and just running 2-3 zone. Like he said, defense in college and NBA is way more complex than come out in 2-3 or man or 1-3-1 or whatever defense you want to run. They use different tactics from every defense basically. But no one's going to come out and just run 2 guards up top and 3 guys down below like Jim Boeheim does.
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of my breakout. What are some of your guys' breakouts?
So
I do think the zone's going to come back in a way because of that shot.
I'm going to stay right on the Syracuse train, and Buddy Boeheim, ballin' Buddy. He played great the tournament. Sucks that they that's gonna. I don't. What year is Buddy? Does anybody know?
I believe he's a senior.
I think he was. Yeah, but
he broke all kinds of records this year for Syracuse.
Yeah, he
was
was. Oh, he's a junior, so he's got one more year left. I would assume that he comes back. But he played great this tournament. It was good to see. Good to see kind of a coach's kid style player just come out and dominate the tournament. Averaged almost 30, I think, 28 or 29. And so that's my pick for breakout player. Not that people didn't know about Buddy already, but and you gotta love the video that was going around on social media yesterday or the last week really of Carmelo and Buddy celebrating after Melo won the national championship in 2003, and Buddy Boeheim barely comes up to his shins, and now Buddy Boeheim is the star that was leading Syracuse through the tournament.
Talk about nervousness. How about Buddy Boeheim's brother that plays at Cornell didn't even get to play this year? Like, you have to go to every Thanksgiving for the rest of your life with your dad's favorite, literally your dad's buddy, sitting there with you, who was the star of the tournament. That's gotta suck.
That would suck.
So breakout players. I mean, you could go a lot of ways. I think that a lot of people learned about Abmas, or however you pronounce his name, from Oral Roberts. Asmus. It's spelled Abmas. Asmus. From Oral Roberts. I know he led the nation in scoring this year, but I think being on the big stage, a lot of people realized who he was. Garza, I know he played 2 games. I know he's the best player in the country all year, but he still averaged 3 points a game, and he was dominating in that loss that they had. You can say what you want, about
he was
Iowa
the
or
only
whatever,
thing
but
keeping that from being a 50-point game. He was the only reason that wasn't a massacre.
But I mean, then you got Thomas from LSU. Anyone who watches the SEC knows about Cameron Thomas.
Freshman.
Yeah, he's a beast. But 2 games in the NCAA tournament where he did on the big stage, people will be aware if they aren't big SEC fans. But there's a lot of nice breakouts in the first few rounds of the tournament.
Rod Favre's brother, Cameron Kurtwig from Loyola. He had a big stage for him. Conference Player of the
Yeah.
Year twice in a row, I think. But that big stage helped him. It helped the internet win the memes more than anything. But the
Yeah.
dude can ball.
My
Yeah.
favorite was Kurtwig walks into Chick-fil-A and says, "Open up a tab," and I was like, "Yeah, pretty good one."
So the obvious choice here is obviously Max Asmus for Oral Roberts. He had 29, 26, 25 points. And like you said yesterday, they would not have been in that game without him. But they wouldn't have won their first 2 games without Kevin O'Banner. So a little bit more behind the scenes here. He was actually leading them in points and rebounding going into yesterday's game. He's like a stretch 4 kind of guy. And especially in that first game, I mean, he hit down some huge shots. So Kevin O'Banner deserves a little credit.
Yep.
Max Asmus, if Steph Curry wasn't a thing 12 years ago, this was about as close as you can get to a Steph Curry type run. Obviously, he wasn't Steph Curry, and he won't be Steph Curry, but that dude was a blur on the court, and he was really fun to watch. So I'll remember Max Asmus for a while. But on another note, going back to UCLA,
I was going
I'm
to say
not
him.
quite sure how to pronounce his name. Johnny Juzang.
Juzang, I think is how it's
He's
pronounced.
averaging 22 points per game on 50% shooting, which is very good for college basketball, and he's got him, primed to go for an Elite Eight spot today.
Well, with those breakouts, let's kind of redo the Final Four. So obviously, all of our brackets got blown to bits
No,
with some of this.
I've
Yeah,
got Michigan.
it did.
Remember?
Yeah, okay, but yeah, they all got pretty well busted. Actually, it is Kyler's your wife leading our bracket challenge, but let's kind of redo.
Technically, Justin leads today, but Dakota has Gonzaga still in it, and Justin had Illinois winning it all.
If Gonzaga wins it all, she'll probably win, which would make 2 years in a row that she's won, which just goes to show you you fill out your bracket. There's a lot of luck involved.
So March 10th next year, Dakota Moore, special guest.
I'm going to be looking at her bracket next year, filling it in. But my Final Four, I have three of my four teams are remaining: Gonzaga, Baylor, Alabama. I expect them all to make it. Gonzaga obviously looks like the best team in the nation, so I think you'd be crazy to say they won't make it. Baylor looks up there with them. They've looked impressive in their games. Alabama's also looked pretty good. They haven't had a tough road. They've got a tougher game today. So we'll see how that. And then we got Oregon State versus Houston. And instead of going chalk, I'm riding Oregon State. I'm hoping they make it. Maybe they can provide a little magic for us. Houston just plays a boring type Big Ten game, and they're better at it than the rest of the Big Ten, obviously.
Big Ten should recruit them.
I am pulling for Oregon State just for a little madness in there, but I think Gonzaga and Baylor are top 2 teams, especially after these first weekend and a half.
So I'm gonna go. Kai saying he's putting Baylor in. I originally took Arkansas over Baylor in this matchup. I'm gonna stick with that. I'm taking Arkansas over Baylor. I would love to see Oregon State make it, Kai, just like you. I don't think that's happening. I'm taking Houston. And then Gonzaga is the easy pick. We talked about earlier about how good they are. But if Oregon wins today, I'm going to take Oregon. Okay, I'm taking Oregon as my other Final Four team there. And then I picked Michigan to win it all. Michigan's still in prime shape to win it all. They got their game today against Florida State. But I'm taking Florida State. I'm actually taking Florida State to come out of that division now. after rethinking it and watching games. So I'm going Oregon, Florida State, Arkansas, and Houston.
So kind of like Kyler, I have 3 of my 4 final 4 teams left. I have Gonzaga, Alabama, Baylor still left, Illinois. I listened to you guys too much when I had Houston written. No, I'm just kidding. I had Houston nowhere near that. I'm gonna say Gonzaga comes still out of the West. I'm gonna say I think that Alabama-Michigan game, I think Michigan-Florida State will be a good game. I do think Michigan will escape it. I think that Alabama-Michigan game is going to be a really fun one, but I'm still going to take Alabama just because I'm going to stick with my original pick. Houston-Oregon State will be a very boring game, a very low-scoring game, and Houston will win. And then Baylor, I think, is the second best team in the country. So I've got Gonzaga beating Baylor in the national championship.
Yeah, so I unfortunately only have two of my Final Four teams still alive because Ohio State and Illinois both punched me in the gut. But to fill in those spots, I'm going to go with Baylor coming out of the South. They do look like a strong team. I originally picked Ohio State, but we saw how that worked out. I do think Arkansas is going to be tough on Baylor, but Baylor's probably going to come out. And then Illinois, they suck. So I'm going to go with Oregon State as well to come out of there, just for the fun of it. And then on the other side, my bracket's still alive. I have Bama coming out of the East, and then I still have USC coming out of the West. I'm telling you guys, the Mobley brothers are good, and I think USC has found it. And yes, this game today versus Oregon, which I'm not going to stay up to watch it because it doesn't come on until 9:45 Eastern, but it's going to be a good game. But I think USC comes out on top. I think they're going to give Gonzaga all they can handle and more and come out and get it to the Final Four. And, I'm really hoping this is more of the Abilene Christian call than it is the Illinois winning it all call right here. But
Carl, going back to your USC pick, so they played like the last 4 or 5 games of the season where Isaiah Mobley was out with an injured ankle, and that's when they hit their downslide. So you might be onto something there. But I think the Baylor-Arkansas game is interesting just because of the talent that Arkansas has. Their guards are super athletic, and they don't really have a big guy, but he's always in the right place at the right time. He had like 12 offensive rebounds yesterday, and Baylor is a shorter team. They don't have a center, so can they keep him off the boards? First off. Second of all, can Arkansas not dig themselves a double-digit hole? Because they've dug themselves a double-digit hole in, I think, 12 games this year, they said yesterday, and came back to win. But you as Chiefs fans, I know you guys know there's only so many holes you can dig yourself in.
That shovel will break eventually.
It comes back to bite you. So that'll be. I think that's
will break
because Arkansas has a great offensive rebounder, and their guards are very long and athletic, going up against Baylor's guards. So that's gonna be a fun game to watch.
Conference we didn't really put any shine on earlier is the SEC. I mean, the SEC. I mean, yeah, they didn't have as many teams in it, but they've done well. You've got Arkansas in the Elite Eight, and you've got a good chance at Alabama coming to the Elite Eight too. So, I mean, that they've done.
And it's not. It's the SEC's doing well, and it's not the Florida Gators, which is a surprise because they've carried the SEC through basketball for however many decades. And
Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky too. Brain fart. Yeah.
Kentucky.
I'd say the SEC didn't underperform. I guess you could say they've slightly overperformed, but Alabama, if you've watched them, they're looking like a pretty strong team too, and steady.
And another thing is the ACC. Only one team left, and it's Florida State. That's something you don't see. Although I guess recently, really, Florida State has done well in the tournament, but that's something you don't usually see. The Big 12 only team left is Baylor. I mean, usually it's KU, but they usually have one team at this point anyway.
The Big East, the only team left is Creighton.
Yeah.
The Big East was a disappointment. Dang it, Georgetown.
The Big East was a disappointment all year. I don't know what you guys were talking about. They weren't good all year.
I hopped on that horse right as soon as it rode up.
Yeah, it should have been, Georgetown, for quote unquote, stole a spot, but so did Oregon State, technically, if we're looking at it, because they won the Pac-12 conference. So we should have we were just on the different horse. The two horses left the line. We were just riding this one instead of this one. And
wrong horse every time.
50-50.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you all listening along with us. We'll see how this March Madness thing breaks down for us. Hopefully some things break your way and your bracket does well. We appreciate all the support. Please remember to like and subscribe. You can catch these on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. That's where I personally listen to them. check us out on Facebook. Respond to any posts we have. If you see us on Twitter, just go ahead and start a dialogue with us. We're always happy to chat sports with anybody. We might call you wrong, but it is what it is.
We call each other wrong all the time.
But I really appreciate all the support, and be good out there and tell your grandma.
Shout out Darvin Ham.